And one of the problems is we don't appreciate the incremental steps of persuasion. If we're a 1 or a 2, way up here, we've been to this, we now know things. We encounter a 10 or a 9. What is your problem? And we want them to move to a 2 or a 1 overnight. Well, people don't do that. People make those moves incrementally. And I can tell you lots of stories of people, farmers, who had one little problem, you make one suggestion, and it's positive, and then, oh my goodness, what else can I do? And they're ready to move to the next level, next level, next level.
Several ways to do emotional detox. Basically, when I say emotional detox, what I mean is clearing out any stuck emotions. So there are many different techniques you can use to do that.
Welcome to another podcast from Beyond Labels with yours truly, Joel Salatin and Dr. Sina McCullough. Today we have a special treat. We're bringing a question and answer period that we had recently at the 2 Days of Truth Summit held at Polyface Farms. Before we get into that, let me assure you that the entire summit is now available for purchase, and you can get this to get all the speakers, and we encourage you to share it with your friends as well to increase the reach of this. It's available in the links in the description box here. And without further ado, here we go live to the question and answer period at the 2-day summit.
Welcome everyone to another podcast from Beyond Labels with your host, yours truly, Joel Salatin, the farmer, and Dr. Sina McCullough, the PhD scientist, researcher, guru for us all. Thank you for joining us. We are here live. Actually, this is a very unusual podcast. We're here live at the 2 Days of Truth conference, shindig, gathering, hosted here at Polyface Farm in Swope, Virginia, the center of the universe, in our agrarian bunker, with folks who have come for these 2 days in the 2 Days of Truth conference. Thank you all for being here.
And for any of you listening or watching at home and you feel like you might have missed out, don't worry. We have our editor and professional videographer, Nolan Gunn, who has been recording everything this weekend, and we're going to be offering that as an online version of this summit. The link to that summit version will be in the description box.
Great. Okay, so we've actually, this is going to be an unusual, we're just doing live, high risk questions, answers, anything at all that anybody wants to ask to us for these 15 or 20 minutes. So let's go to the first question.
Hi, I'm Gordon from South Carolina.
Hi.
And I wanted to ask, I guess maybe Joel or Sina as well, but what would you think, or could it be done to where a PMA could serve as an aggregator?
Okay, so that's a little bit of a technical question, but everything's on the table here. So a PMA, for those of you that don't know, is a personal membership association, and these are gradually becoming a circumvention tool to the onerous compliance requirements in food safety things, especially slaughtering. Right now, a lot of people don't realize that the community, the small scale butcher slaughterhouse capacity is overrun in this country. We call them slots. So you call and I need 6 spots. I need 7 spots, whatever, to get processed. And the average wait time is often a year. Well, think about that. If you a pig is normally processed at about 8 months. So we're talking about getting a processing date for an animal that you don't even have. And so it's really a glitch in the system, and of course the small scale processing facilities are being hammered by prejudicial bureaucrats, regulators in the system. And so it's a real problem. People want to, got food security issues. People want to eat local food, and then, then you have these hurdles to be able to access the marketplace. And so there is a growing interest in what's called a personal membership association to completely circumvent inspections, circumvent the bureaucracy, circumvent the whole thing. There comes a time when circumvention is actually more efficacious than compliance, when compliance becomes so tyrannous like it has now. And so these are modeled after the country club, golf club kind of deals that are not public. In other words, if you want to go to the country club, play golf, you can't go. You got to be a member. All right, so they're non-public, and so this is absolutely an option for some people, and I'm not going to go into all the particulars, but it's being used around the country now by some people. The kind of the weak part of it is that if you go over about 200 members, it begins attracting IRS audits, and it becomes a red flag issue, okay, for regulators. So, for a pretty small outfit, of course, you can have a PMA, your spouse can have a PMA, your child could have a PMA. So, you can fudge it some, but essentially, your customers become members of voluntary members of an association to which they pay a fee, which entitles them to privileges. In this case, it's not playing golf. I mean, you could put in a couple holes so they could if they wanted to, but in this case, it's to meat, pot pies, quiche, whatever it is you want to do, milk, and so it's another tool in the toolbox of onerous bureaucratic circumvention to open up the option of direct producer consumer food trade. Great question.
Hi, it's Scott from Utah. I just wanted to first thank Dr. Sina and Joel for putting on such a beautiful event for us lunatics to gather.
Oh, thank you.
And find community amongst a world that's flat out insane. I have a tremendous amount of respect for the level of grace and humility with which you two are battling on these front lines. And I was just wondering if you had any advice for those of us that are trying to pick up in arms to join the journey in order to remain humble with humility and grace of such a serious situation.
Wow, that's a great question. You want to go first?
I'll let you start. I just finished talking for 2 minutes. You're going to go next.
So I guess the first question is, how are we handling it with grace and humility so we can share with somebody else how they can handle it that way? So wonderful question, by the way, and thank you for those kind words. The COVID journey for me has been deja vu of my journey into the food supply. So as many of you, if you've read our books or my book or my book with Joel or listen to our podcast, you're probably aware that I did blindly trust the food supply, and it was devastating when I learned the truth. And I was so upset that, and this was stewing in me. It took me 5 years to write my first book, Hands Off My Food. And part of the reason was because I was sick during that time, that I got pregnant, whatever. But a big part of it was because it took me so long to believe it. And that's, I went down many rabbit holes because I thought, that can't be true. No, okay, I found another reference. That can't be true either. And then I find it in the government's own words. Well, that can't be true. Let me check with the Government Accountability Office to make sure that's, So it took me a long time because I didn't want to believe it. And then I got very angry once I realized it was true and that they had been deceptive, doing backdoor deals, there was corruption, and sometimes just flat out lying to us. And I'm not talking about COVID, right? I'm still talking about just the food supply, but you can already see some of the similarities. And then what really devastated me, the final straw, was I'm upstairs researching for that book. My husband's downstairs with the kids. And I was diving deeper into recombinant bovine growth hormone, right? You all familiar with RBGH, right? Which is still in our milk supply today, I might add. So I read something that totally floored me. And it was that for 8 years, the FDA allowed this experimental milk, like it was this milk that was being produced with from these cows that were injected with recombinant bovine growth hormone. It was still considered experimental at that time. And the FDA allowed the company to sell that milk in our supermarkets without a label. And I thought, that can't be true. They're supposed to be protecting the safety of our food. So I contacted the Government Accountability Office and found the document where they said, they verified that's what the FDA actually did for 8 years. Many of us drank that milk not knowing. And the Government Accountability Office went on record to state that they were opposed to the FDA stance that the humans, basically the citizens of the United States, can be part of an experimental trial. So the FDA does still to this day take the stance that when there's an experimental food product, or that was an experimental drug put into an animal that produced the food for us, that it's okay for them to experiment on us without our consent, without our knowledge. So I found that out, come downstairs, just storming down the stairs, right, to go to my husband. I'm like, I can't believe it. You won't believe what I just read. And for him, he's like, what? It's all the same. Like, it's just more corruption. Why are you so upset? And I'm just going, blowing my top, right? And so he looks me straight in the eye and he goes, this is all the same. You've heard this all before. Why are you so upset right now? And I just looked him in the eye and I said, because they make me sick. And that's honestly how I felt. And my husband, I opened my heart, right? That was sitting in me for years. And my husband looked me in the eye, straight face, and he said, no, they did not. You made yourself sick because you didn't know. You were an uninformed consumer. That hit my heart. Needless to say, I walked away, stormed off, and you just don't understand because you're not sick. So I went upstairs by myself and I prayed about it and I said, just show me the truth. I can take it. Whatever you need me to see, show it to me. And that's when he told me, this is your responsibility, but I can help you out of it. Hand it to me. Wow. So I did. I handed all the anger, all that frustration, all the feeling of betrayal. I handed it all over to God, and he took it. And that was the moment the entire course of that book changed. I went through and rewrote most of it because I no longer wrote it from a victim standpoint. I wrote it from a thriver standpoint. And it became about solutions. So I carried that mentality with me ever since. It changed my entire perception of not only the FDA, the USDA, EPA, but of life itself. It taught me to take responsibility, and that was a little scary, right? But with responsibility comes power. That's when I stepped into my power and was convicted that I could make a difference. If not in the world, but I can make a difference in my life and in my children's life. So that's how I approached COVID, was that I can't control what they do. And I can only control what I do, how I react to things, the information I share with my family. And I can just be a beacon of hope and of light and trust that God will connect me with the other people that are like-minded. And he has. Look, we're all here.
That's great. So the beauty of being able to go second is you have a little more time to think.
I know.
So I've got a couple little things that I can get through pretty quick, I think, to help you to how to interact with whatever the crazies or the naysayers or whatever you want to call it. So one of my epiphanies moments was I was asked to go down to Richmond and testify on a food choice bill. We were I think this was an effort of Virginia Independent Consumer Farmers Association, VICFA. You can see the shirt right here. And it was an early effort to try to get some more freedoms for being able to sell highly regulated foods like milk and beef and pork and things. And so I testified before the Senate committee, and the head of meat and poultry inspection in Virginia pulled me aside after we had a break. And so, kind of mingling around there in the hearing room, he pulls me aside. He said, Joel, you don't understand. He said, if we gave people food choice, where people could actually choose where to buy their food, we couldn't build hospitals fast enough for all of the sick people that would get tainted food, dirty food from farmers. And a light went on. I said, this guy actually, I couldn't disagree more, but he has good intentions. And so the thing I want to start with is, don't ever assume the person that you're dealing with has bad intentions. You can disagree. Assume they have good intentions. Assume they aren't evil intended. Because as soon as you assume evil intention, you can't have a conversation. Assume they mean the best, and they're trying sincerely to do the best, and you get a lot farther in your discussion. Number one. Number two is in persuasion. If you have a scale of 1 to 10, and in food we'd say a 10 is a person that gets all their food out of the gas station, and a 1 is a person that has a food mill in their kitchen and mung bean sprout jars on the windowsill, right, and a herd share for raw milk, and that's a 1. And one of the problems is we don't appreciate the incremental steps of persuasion. If we're a 1 or a 2, way up here, we've been to this, we now know things. We encounter a 10 or a 9. What is your problem? And we want them to move to a 2 or a 1 overnight. Well, people don't do that. People make those moves incrementally. And I can tell you lots of stories of people, farmers, who had one little problem. You make one suggestion and it's positive, and then, oh my goodness, what else can I do? And they're ready to move to the next level, next level, next level. So just appreciate persuasion. Part of the diplomacy of persuasion is it's incremental. It's one step at a time. And the final one, my dad used to always say, he said, you can't push on a string. You got to pull on a string. And this came after an evening, went down to a neighbor's and told him that one day, this was early on, one day we'd have 100 cows on this farm. The neighbor just laughed him to scorn. Dad was a pretty emotional, he had a pretty tender heart, and I remember him coming home and being just really torn up about this neighbor laughed at me. He said, I'll never tell somebody else what I'm going to do. I'm just going to do it and pull on the string and lead by example. And that's a good one too. Just don't go around and, I'm going to do this and we're going to do that and we're going to do the other. No. Do it and pull on that string and lead by example.
All right, I'm Andy from Oldwell, Virginia, and I've got an
Hi.
easy question for Sina. What's with the mason jars?
Oh, so for those of you listening on the podcast, this whole summit I've been walking around with my glass mason jar filled with water. And it's kind of a funny story because I'm not from the South, right? I'm from California. So when I moved here, I just started walking around with my mason jar filled with water, and people gave me the strangest looks. And finally somebody said to me, "What are you walking around with your moonshine?" And I go home and I asked my husband, who's from the South, I said, "What's moonshine?" Like, I didn't even know. So yes, this is my water. And usually what I do is I pour my water into these glass jars that have etchings on them of gratitude. So my jar will say something like love or grateful or I love you or, hug me.
This one says self-sealing.
Yes, this is just a regular mason jar.
That's apparently a statement of gratitude too.
That is. I am self-sufficient, so I could seal things. Yes. No, so usually that's what I have is these glass jars with things etched on them to help structure my water because that's my belief that my intention goes there. This is because I don't want to drink out of plastic or the paper cups, so I did bring many of these actually with my water from my deep well from home. When I'm here on the farm, I'll drink the water, but when I'm at the hotel, I drink my water that I brought
You
from
can go
home.
dip it out of the stock tank.
Yeah,
over
I
there.
know. I'm going to take some from the cow trough to go home and have my kids and my husband try it. Like,
That's great. All right, I think we have time for two more quick ones.
Okay, I'm Katie from North Carolina.
hi.
And hi. And I was just wondering, as most people here, we're awake, right? My question is, do you guys have any tips or anything for like the things we cannot control? Now we're already doing our garden and getting our animals, but we cannot control the chemtrails, right? We cannot control what's sprayed on us. Do you guys have any ideas for like, I don't know, protocols or for cleaning your water or your feed? Because you see that stuff coming and you're like, that's going to my plants. So that's the question.
Well, I would, yeah, that's a difficult question. I mean, obviously there are things that you can't control. So from a production ecology standpoint, the best thing I know is organic matter. Compost and organic matter is like nature's, Alka-Seltzer, bufferant, detoxicant, all combined into one thing. My favorite example is the Lufki farm in Austria when Chernobyl blew. The radioactive cloud came over and fell down in all that truck gardening, vegetable production area of Austria, and all the plants got radioactive and they had to destroy them. There was only one farm that there was no radioactivity in the soil, and it was the Lufkis, who had used compost for 20 years and had built up their organic matter so high that it protected the soil. So one of the best things you can do is for yourself in your own garden, your own household. You see the chemtrails, neighbors are spraying glyphosate or whatever. The best thing you can do is get your organic matter way up through compost, and then you can elevate your beds, your garden beds, elevate your beds above terrain level. So get them up a foot, 2 feet, so that the plant roots aren't going down clear into the soil, and you can give yourself a little bit of a protection that way.
I love that. Great advice. So what I do, since I don't have a farm, but at our house, what I do is some of the key things I do have a whole house water filtration system, even though I have a deep well. So that goes through all our water in our whole house, and it goes to the water that we water our garden with and the water for our pool. So everything does go through that filter. I also consume herbs on a regular basis. As you know from the cooking demonstration, lots of scientific literature backing up the power of herbs, not only to pull metals out of the body, right? Some of them specifically can do that, and other toxins, but to lower the overall level of inflammation that can result from exposure to these toxins. I also, one of my top thing that I recommend for people is to emotionally detox, right? When you emotionally detox and you move that energy through your body, that's going to have one of the most profound effects you can create. It's in terms of protecting yourself from all types of toxins, including chemtrails. So that's my number one go-to, alongside with prayer. So I will say prayers for our family for protection every day. So every night before we go to bed, and then every meal, we pray in our own unique way, with expressing gratitude. We all go around the table, express gratitude, raise that elevated emotional state, and we pray for him to protect us and protect the food, and proactively pray. So we don't say more from a victim mentality of, can you please help us protect this? We'll say, thank you, God, for protecting.
You don't pray, let the chemtrail planes crash.
Yeah, I don't do that because that's focusing on the negative, right? Like, no, I just focus on the positive. And we'll say a prayer like in the moment, like, thank you, God, for protecting this food and for allowing it to be nourishing and for it to give our body everything that we need to thrive. So as though it already happened, and the body will respond accordingly, and it will help you increase the nutrients absorbed from that meal as well, because it puts you in a better state in terms of your nervous system. It helps calm you out of fight or flight.
Great, thanks. One more question.
Can you just, the emotional detox, when you summarize that? What does that mean? They're asking for a summary of the emotional detox. What does that
Emotional
mean?
detox.
Oh, so what emotional detox means. So we could do an entire series on this. Like we can do a whole 2-day summit on this alone. I mean, gosh, is that interesting to anybody, how to do emotional detox? Yeah. Would that be a topic you'd want for next year, emotional detox? Okay, so several ways to do emotional detox. Basically, when I say emotional detox, what I mean is clearing out any stuck emotions. So there are many different techniques you can use to do that. You can use prayer. You can use the tuning forks, that Eileen mentioned. You can use energy medicine in terms of your hands healing. That's more, the biblical approach that Michelle mentioned earlier. There's all kinds of techniques that you can use. I will do a combination of things depending on how stuck the emotion is, what the root cause of it was, like what type of trauma. If it was a huge trauma in my life, like some childhood trauma, there's many things I'll end up doing, like journaling, talking it out, speaking to the person in my mind, whatever I need to do to come to a place of forgiveness so that I can release that emotion. And I've noticed that in the times, like we were talking about in our talk with being able to complete the nervous system cycle, when I can do activities like mountain biking that do complete that nervous system cycle for me and bring me back into a parasympathetic state, that's when I have more clarity and I have a better ability to clear an emotion. It's really difficult to clear emotion when you're in the sympathetic state. So I would suggest if you want to try to practice clearing them, like through forgiveness or whatnot, to do something that gets you into the parasympathetic state first and then try to release it. It'll be much easier.
The only thing I would add to that is that's the power of mission. And so many times, look, we're hardwired to remember the negative. I mean, that's what we call them stoplights, not go lights, right? Nobody comes home from town and says, "Hey, I hit 5 go lights today." We remember what stops us, not what makes us go, and that's the power of vision and mission statements. So if you take that frustration and move it to what I want to do, what makes me go, that moves us into after the forgiveness. Yeah, forgiveness is right on top. But then that puts us in a positive frame of reference rather than just being frustrated about the things that I can't change.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Last question.
Hey, Ricky from North Carolina.
Hi, Ricky.
Hey, something I've noticed, and maybe you have too, over the last few years, that people of influence have spread a certain idea. It goes out across mainstream, and all kinds of people buy off on it. The next thing I'm seeing is the attack on the meat eater, and pushing these plant-based meats and saying it's a healthier alternative. Me logically thinking, I'm thinking, okay, that's going to take up pasture land to monoculture grow one single set of vegetable. It's going to be sprayed with chemicals. It has to go through an extensive refinement process that's not any better for the environment than anything else. Yet tons of people are going to jump on the bandwagon because Bill Gates is saying, hey, we're going to grow your burgers. Has there been any research to negate that? Has there already been preparations to fight that notion?
There is a host of material now. I mean, from there are now numerous books. The Sacred Cow by yes. We've got Nicolette Nyman, who wrote the Sacred Beef or whatever it is. Anyway, I'm just off the top of my head, I can't think of all these books, but there are now. One of the early ones was Lair Keith with The Vegetarian Myth. Meat, a Benign Extravaganza by Simone Fairley. I mean, there's a British book. There's a tremendous amount of research now, not only going into the nutrition, but also the ecological advantage of especially the cow. And when people say, these cows are inefficient, say, yeah, that's why they build soil. If everything was as efficient as a squash and a cucumber, we wouldn't have any soil. So so it's the ability of the animal to take sunlight in real time and turn it into something nutritious. You and I can't eat, cellulose, but an herbivore can, and of course chickens, historically they ate everything that spoiled and was rotten and peelings and byproducts. So animals, we don't have enough time to go into all that. We probably should do a podcast on that as well. But yes, there is a lot of research and development coming on defending the meat component of authentic meat in the diet.
Yeah, and in terms of the ingredients in these alternative fake meat products, we wrote about that in Beyond Labels, right? There's a tip on that where we expose the fact that one of the ingredients in the Impossible Burger, right, the main ingredient that was genetically engineered, it's supposed to make it taste like meat, that ingredient is actually grass.
Yeah, there's
yeah,
and not only that, but I don't know if you're aware that in the last 2 or 3 weeks.
Wait, does anybody know what I mean by grass? Like not the actual grass on the ground?
Not green grass.
Yeah, but
generally recognized as safe.
It's generally recognized as safe. Yeah, not green grass. Because I saw people laughing and I was like, wait a minute, they may think I'm talking about green grass. It's shoved green grass in there. No. What I mean is that it's generally recognized as safe by the government.
So it wasn't really tested. And so what's in the last 2 or 3 weeks, you may not know that there's now a lawsuit against, I think it's Beyond Beef, not Impossible Burger, but I think it's Beyond Beef, where their labels, they've now found their labels are significantly off on protein content. Whereas when you buy it and it has your nutrition label, and the labels are way off. So there's now been filed a lawsuit in federal court against them for essentially, for not having an accurate label. I'm not going to say lying. Maybe they all were well intended and it was just a mistake. I don't know. But at least for the product not being what's in the label. So yeah, there's a lot going on, and this is a hot topic and one that we'll continue to delve into in the future. Thank you for being with us for this podcast of Beyond Labels. And we look forward to seeing you next week on Beyond Labels.